Emily Parker is a 16-year-old girl living in New York with her parents, David and Lisa Parker. The Parker family used to live a comfortable life thanks to the technology startup that her parents had built for more than 10 years. Emily grew up in a luxury apartment in the heart of Manhattan. Accustomed to the hustle and bustle of life, fancy cafes, bustling shopping centers, and modern conveniences. However, everything changed when her parents' company fell into financial crisis. A failed deal and bad investment left them in debt. Creditors began to put pressure on them. And after many unsuccessful attempts to fix the situation, David and Lisa were forced to face the risk of bankruptcy. Not only that, they were also investigated for using unclear sources of capital, with the possibility of being prosecuted. Knowing that they had no other choice, Emily's parents decided to leave the United States illegally to avoid being pursued by the law and those who wanted to collect their debt. But because they could not take Emily on that dangerous journey, they decided to send her to Texas to live with her grandfather, Henry Parker, whom Emily had never met before. The flight from New York to Texas lasted 3 hours. But for Emily, that time seemed endless. She could not believe that she was leaving everything familiar, going to a strange place with a grandfather she had only heard about through a few stories from her parents. Since childhood, she had not had many opportunities to meet him, because her father, David, had left home when he was young to start a career in the city and rarely returned. When the plane landed at a small airport in Texas, Emily dragged her heavy suitcase out. In front of her was an old man, white hair and beard, a stern face, wearing an old plaid shirt and a faded cowboy hat. It was her grandfather, Henry Parker. "Are you Emily?" he asked, his voice hoarse and deep. She nodded, feeling strange. He was not like the cheerful and friendly old men she had seen in movies. There were no warm hugs, no kind greetings, just a nod and a pat on the shoulder before he turned around, picked up her suitcase and put it in the back of his old pickup truck. The journey from the airport to his farm lasted more than 2 hours. Through deserted roads and vast fields of grass, Emily looked out the car window, saw herds of grazing cows, long wooden fences, and sparse houses. There were no tall buildings, no bright neon lights, no bustling crowds like in New York. She felt as if she were being transported to another world. "How long will I be here?" Emily asked, breaking the silence. "As long as you want," he replied, not taking his eyes off the road. That didn't help Emily feel any better. She sighed, leaning her head against the window, feeling dejected. When she arrived, Emily got out of the car and looked around. Parker Ranch was large, but not spectacular. A simple 2-story log house, barns, and vast pastures stretching to the horizon. The sound of the wind whistling through old wooden fences, the distant lowing of cows, and the smell of hay mixed with the earthy scent, all of it was so foreign to her. The first few days on the farm were the hardest for Emily. There was no stable Wi-Fi, which prevented her from staying in touch with friends or updating her social media. There was no Starbucks or shopping mall for her to pass the time like before. Farming was hard work, a far cry from the comforts of city life. Grandpa was quiet, strict, and not used to expressing affection through words or physical gestures. Every morning, he woke up at 5 a.m. to feed the cows, check the fences, and do other farm chores. Emily had no choice but to gradually get used to this lifestyle. At first, she resisted, refused to help, and even deliberately slept in to avoid having to wake up early. But Grandpa never yelled at her or forced her. He only said one sentence: "Everyone here has to work. If you don't want to, you can take care of your own food." Though she didn't want to admit it, Emily knew she had no choice but to adapt. Despite his outward aloofness, Mr. Henry had always silently cared for Emily in his own way. Every morning he left a cup of warm milk on the kitchen table, even though he didn't wake her up. When he saw her shivering from the cold, he left an old leather jacket on the chair, but said nothing. When she walked alone on the farm, he quietly followed from a distance to make sure she was safe. Emily gradually realized that, although he didn't say it, he cared about her more than she thought. Even though she had been at the farm for a week, Emily still felt lonely. She missed the bustling streets of New York, Missed going out with friends. Missed the voices of her parents on the phone. But this time, her phone was filled with unanswered messages. Her parents were too busy running away, and she didn't know when she would see them again. One night, she cried quietly in her room. No one heard her, except for Max, her grandfather's old dog. He quietly jumped onto the bed and rubbed his head against her hand. Emily hugged him, feeling a little warmth in this strange space. Little did she know, in the next room, her grandfather was still awake. He sat quietly at the table, his eyes looking out the window, deep in thought. He understood that his granddaughter was not ready to accept this place yet. But he also knew that time would change everything. After a week of living on her grandfather's farm, Emily began to realize that she couldn't keep resisting forever. She had to adapt, no matter how hard it was. That morning, as the sun was rising over the grasslands, her grandfather called her outside. "You're going to help me with something today." Emily mumbled something under her breath but dragged herself out of bed. Her grandfather handed her a pair of gloves and pointed to the piles of hay bales. "You're going to help me clear the hay and feed the cows." Emily grimaced. She had never done anything this heavy before. But looking at her grandfather's determined gaze, she knew she had no choice. At first, it was horrible. The hay stuck to her hair and clothes, and dust flew into her nose, making her sneeze constantly. Her soft hands, used to holding pens and phones, were now carrying heavy bales of hay, making her ache all over. "I don't think I can do it," she complained. "No one does it right the first time," Grandpa replied curtly, then continued his work. Emily bit her lip, looking at him. Some part of her didn't want to be seen as weak. She took a deep breath, then continued working, even though sweat was already soaking her back. Over the following days, Emily gradually got used to the rhythm of farm life. She learned how to feed the cows, mend the wooden fences, and clean the barns. At first, she did it just because she didn't want Grandpa to complain. But gradually, she realized that there was something peaceful in this life. No more honking car horns, but instead the sound of the wind whistling through the fields. No more bright phone screens, but instead the brilliant sunsets on the farm. No more fake city relationships, just her and her grandfather. Quiet but genuine. One afternoon, when she was resting after a tiring day of work, her grandfather suddenly placed a glass of cool lemonade in front of her. "You did well," he said. His voice low but sincere. Emily was surprised. This was the first time he had complimented her. She looked at him, then smiled, feeling her heart lighten for the first time. One of Emily's favorite things about living on the farm was being close to nature and animals. She was especially close to Max, her grandfather's old dog. Whenever she felt sad or lonely, Max would run to rub his head against her hand, as if he understood what she was thinking. She also gradually learned how to ride a horse. Her grandfather had a horse named Midnight, which Emily was afraid of at first. But after a few tries, she gradually felt excited when riding it on the red dirt roads. One morning, while feeding the cows, she noticed a calf stuck in the fence. It was crying weakly, seemingly very scared. "Grandpa, what should I do?" She quickly called out to her grandfather. He just looked at her for a moment and said, "Find a way yourself. I can do it." Emily bit her lip, trying to remember what her grandfather had taught her. She approached gently, talked to the calf to calm it down, then used all her strength to push the fence a little so it could free itself. When the calf finally got out on its own, Emily breathed a sigh of relief. She turned around and saw her grandfather looking at her with a rare smile. "Good job, granddaughter." It was the first time she felt like she really belonged here. After more than a month on the farm, Emily realized that she no longer found things as harsh as at first. She was used to waking up early, drinking a cup of warm milk that her grandfather had prepared, and then starting to work in the fields. But the biggest change was the relationship between her and her grandfather Henry. At first, the two hardly talked to each other. But over time, the short conversations gradually became deeper. One afternoon when Emily was cutting hay, she curiously asked him, "Grandpa, why did my father rarely mention you before?" Grandpa was silent for a moment, then slowly said, Your father always wanted to find another life. I don't blame him, but maybe he thought I wouldn't understand what he was pursuing. Emily suddenly realized that her grandfather had also lost a loved one in the same way she had experienced. She had never thought about how he felt about living alone in this place for so many years. That evening, for the first time, she took the initiative to sit down next to him while he was drinking tea on a wooden chair on the porch. "Do you miss my dad?" He didn't answer right away, but his distant eyes said it all. "Yes, but sometimes, missing someone doesn't mean you can keep them by your side." Those words made Emily think a lot. She began to understand more about her grandfather, about the losses he had experienced. In the following days, Emily gradually felt the simple beauty of farm life. She loved the feeling of riding midnight out to the fields in the early morning, when the mist was still hanging over the grass. She loved the afternoons sitting on the wooden fence, watching the sun set behind the distant hills. She began to write down the interesting things she learned in a notebook. From how to take care of livestock to the little stories her grandfather told her. One day, while preparing dinner, she suddenly looked at her grandfather and laughed. "I didn't think I would ever get used to this life, but now I see that it's not so bad at all." Grandpa just smiled, but there was something warm in his eyes. One morning, when Emily woke up, she realized that her grandfather had not left the house as usual. She knocked on his door but got no answer. Worried, she pushed the door open and entered, and saw him lying on the bed, his forehead covered in sweat. "Grandpa, what's wrong?" She ran over in panic. Grandpa Henry tried to sit up, his voice weak. "It's just a fever. It's fine." But Emily knew he was very tired. Without hesitation, she took a cold towel and placed it on his forehead, then ran to cook some porridge. Even though cooking was not her forte, she still tried her best. That whole day, she did not leave his side for a moment. She realized that she had been more worried about her grandfather than she thought. When the fever gradually subsided, he looked at her, his eyes full of pride. "You have grown up, Emily." That was the moment she understood that she was no longer just a guest here. She had become a part of this place. Life on Emily's farm with her grandfather Henry gradually became more familiar and peaceful than ever. As each day passed, she felt truly attached to this place. But then, an unexpected event broke that peace. One afternoon, when Emily was tying the wooden fence behind the barn, an old pickup truck drove by on the dirt road leading to the farm. The man behind the wheel looked fierce. His eyes narrowed as he observed the surrounding area. When he saw Emily, he stopped the car, rolled down the window and smirked. "Is that Mr. Henry's granddaughter?" "I'm Joe, living on the farm across the hill." Emily felt a little uncomfortable under his scrutiny. She just nodded and turned away. "You're working so hard for just getting here?" Joe continued. Something in his voice made her shiver. Before Emily could reply, Grandpa walked out of the barn, his eyes cold. "Do you need anything, Joe?" Joe shrugged, smiling. "Nothing, Mr. Henry. I was just passing by. Wanted to say hello." Then he started the engine, drove away, leaving an unpleasant feeling lingering in the air. Grandpa stood still for a long time. His eyes darkened. Emily could sense that something was wrong. "Grandpa, who is he?" she asked. Grandpa Henry sighed, then said slowly, "Joe is an untrustworthy person. Stay away from him." Emily nodded, but still felt uneasy. From that day on, Emily began to notice Joe appearing around the farm more often. He often drove by, sometimes stopping at the gate, looking inside before leaving. One afternoon, Emily was walking home from school when it suddenly started to rain. She was waiting for the bus at the bus stop about 3 miles from the farm, not wearing a coat and shivering. As she was about to pull out her phone to call her grandfather, a pickup truck slowed down on the side of the road. The window rolled down, and she recognized Joe's familiar face. "Get in, it's raining," he said, his voice sounding concerned. Emily backed away a little. "No need, I'll wait for the bus." Joe smiled, but his smile made her feel uneasy. "The buses are slow here. Don't want to get wet and catch a cold, do you?" Emily felt awkward. The rain was getting heavier, and she really didn't want to stand here for long. But her instincts told her not to trust this man. She shook her head. "Thanks, but I'm fine." Joe shrugged, but his eyes were filled with displeasure. "Fine. But if you change your mind, just say so." He drove away, leaving Emily standing there, her mind in turmoil. That night, when she got home, she told her grandfather about this. His face fell immediately. "If you see him from now on, don't talk to him. And never get in his car," he said, his voice sterner than ever. Emily nodded. She had never seen her grandfather so serious. In the days that followed, Emily didn't see much of Joe anymore. But she couldn't deny that she always had the feeling that she was being watched. When she went to school, she sometimes felt like someone was staring at her from afar. When she worked on the farm, she sometimes saw strange footprints on the ground around the fence. And every time it got dark, she couldn't help but feel uneasy when she stepped out onto the porch. One night, while she was sleeping, she suddenly woke up. She heard footsteps outside her window. Her heart was pounding. She held her breath, listening carefully. There was a rustling sound in the dark, as if someone was walking across the dry grass. She jumped up, ran out of the room, and knocked on her grandfather's door. Grandpa Henry immediately jumped up, grabbed his flashlight and old shotgun. The two of them stepped outside. The flashlight beam swept across the garden, but no one was there. However, on the wet ground, there were strange shoe prints. Emily shivered. "You're not mistaken. Someone was standing outside your window." Grandpa clenched the gun in his hand, his eyes filled with worry. "From now on, you are not allowed to go out alone at night." Emily nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling of danger that was approaching. In the following days, Emily no longer saw Joe around the farm. She breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that perhaps she had been worrying too much. But even so, the feeling of unease still lingered in her heart. One late afternoon, after school, Emily walked to the bus stop as usual. The sky was cloudy today, the air getting colder as the sun was about to set. She stood at the bus stop, looking at her watch. The bus was later than usual. She shivered slightly. Suddenly, a familiar engine sounded. A pickup truck slowly stopped in front of her. The window rolled down, and Joe sat there, smiling unpleasantly. "Missing the bus again?" "Lucky for you today, I had to pass by." Emily froze. "No need, I'll wait for the bus." Joe raised his eyebrows, looking disappointed. "Are you always this stubborn? Come on. Your grandfather would be happy if you came home early." He emphasized the word, grandfather, making Emily shiver. She shook her head, taking a step back. "Thanks, but I'm fine." Joe sighed, then suddenly opened the car door and got out. "You know, I don't like being rejected." Emily's heart pounded. She turned to run, but before she could get far, a rough hand grabbed her arm. "Don't make things difficult for each other," Joe whispered, his voice colder than before. Emily struggled in panic, but he was too strong. "Let me go." No one was around. It was getting dark, and the bus hadn't arrived yet. Joe held her tighter, pulling her toward the bus. "Get in the bus now." He took her to an empty lot and began to commit depraved acts with her. Like an enemy, he tore her shirt open. His human-animal instincts became even more intense when he saw the white body of the young girl. Her plump, undeveloped breasts made him even more excited. He pressed his face against the girl's ear and took a deep breath to feel the scent of the young girl. He slowly unbuttoned his pants. Fear surged through Emily. She couldn't let this happen. She used all her strength, stomping on his foot, making him hiss in pain. Taking advantage of that moment, she broke free, running towards the small road leading to the farm. Joe cursed, then jumped into the car, chasing after her. Emily ran as fast as she could, but the sound of the engine was getting closer and closer. She gasped, her heart pounding. Suddenly, the headlights were shining directly on her. She heard the screeching of brakes behind her. There was no other way. She turned to the side path, rushing into the dense forest. Joe roared angrily. "You think you can escape?" He stopped the car, chasing after her. The surrounding trees were dark. only the faint light from the moon shining through the leaves. Emily ran, breathing heavily. She heard Joe's voice getting closer. "Come out here, you stupid brat." She bit her lip, trying not to make a sound. She had to find a way out of this place. She looked around, trying to remember the times her grandfather had shown her how to find her way in the woods. Suddenly, a thought flashed through her mind. She had to get back to the farm. Only her grandfather could help her. With her last determination, she held her breath, turned in another direction, and ran towards the farm. Behind her, Joe's voice was still ringing, but it seemed like he had lost sight of her. She didn't stop, continuing to run, even though her legs were already weak. Just get home. Just get back to her grandfather. Finally, the lights from the farm appeared in her sight. She almost collapsed in front of the gate, but still managed to shout, "Grandpa!" Emily was almost exhausted when she reached the front gate of the farm. Her whole body was shaking. Her breathing was rapid, but she still managed to scream, "Grandpa, help me!" The front door opened immediately. Grandpa Henry rushed out, holding an old hunting rifle. When he saw his granddaughter in a state of panic, he immediately knew something was wrong. "Emily, what's going on?" Emily gasped, trying to speak in ragged breaths. "Joe, he's chasing you." As soon as she finished speaking, the sound of a car engine rang out from the path. Bright headlights swept across the yard, and Joe's pickup truck pulled up, stopping right outside the gate. The door opened. Joe got out, his face full of anger and ferocity. "Give her over, old man." His voice was full of menace. But Grandpa Henry was not shaken. He stood in front of Emily, his eyes cold, his shotgun raised. "Get off my land before I blow your brains out." Joe sneered, but his eyes wavered when he saw the gun. "You can't keep him forever. My grandson is not yours to take." Henry's voice was deep and firm. The tension in the air was suffocating. Emily clutched her grandfather's arm, her whole body still shaking. Joe clenched his fists, hesitation written all over his face. He was used to intimidating people. But this time, Henry was not one to be cowed. "You think you can hit me, old man?" Joe sneered, but he took a step back. "You try." Henry scowled, his hand tightening on the trigger. Joe looked around, realizing he was at a disadvantage. There was no one to help him. And no matter how strong he was, a shotgun in the hands of a man who had hunted all his life was still a real threat. "I'll be back," he hissed, backing away from the car. "Next time you set foot on this land, I guarantee you won't get out of here in one piece," Mr. Henry warned. Joe gritted his teeth, then jumped into the car, starting the engine. He drove away, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. Emily collapsed, tears streaming down her face. I thought he was going to take me." Grandfather held her tightly, his voice steady as a rock in a storm. "No one can hurt you while I'm here." After bringing Emily into the house, Mr. Henry immediately called the police. His voice was firm. "I want to report an attacker. He tried to kidnap my granddaughter." Emily sat on the chair, her hands still shaking as she held the glass of water he handed her. She was still scared, but seeing her grandfather's calmness, she gradually calmed down. Not long after, the police car appeared. 2 officers got out, listening to Henry and Emily's statements. "We've received some reports about this Joe guy before," one officer said. "But no one has concrete evidence to arrest him. But if Emily is willing to testify, we can open an investigation." Emily swallowed, but then she looked up, her eyes determined. "I'm ready." Grandfather put a hand on her shoulder, nodding slightly in approval. "You were very brave." The police took notes and left, promising to keep a close eye on Joe. When they left, Grandfather turned to look at Emily. "You did a great job, Emily." She nodded, feeling safe for the first time in days. That night, Emily couldn't sleep right away. She lay in bed, thinking about everything. She used to think that life on the farm was boring and dull. But now she realized, this was her home, and her grandfather was the only one who was always ready to protect her. She couldn't run away from danger forever. She had to face it. Tomorrow, life would continue. But from now on, She knew she had become stronger. She knew that her grandfather would always be there for her, no matter what happened. In the days that followed, life on the farm gradually returned to normal. But for Emily, everything had changed. She no longer felt as strange or lost as before. Every morning, she helped her grandfather feed the animals, water the plants in the garden, and when she had free time, she sat on the porch, listening to stories that she had never cared about before. Gradually, the farm was no longer a temporary place for her to wait for her parents to return. It became home. Joe no longer appeared. After the police began investigating, he left town. Even so, her grandfather was always vigilant. His shotgun was now placed right by the door, a reminder that he was ready to protect his granddaughter at any time. Emily had changed too. She was no longer the shy city girl she used to be. She knew how to protect herself, knew when to speak up, and most importantly, she knew she was no longer alone. One day, while Emily was doing her homework in her room, the phone rang. It was an unknown number. She picked it up, her heart beating fast when she heard the familiar voice. "Emily, it's Mom." Her eyes were blurred with tears. "Mom, where are you? Are Mom and Dad okay?" Her mother's voice was trembling. "We're okay, baby. It's been hard, but we're trying. We're sorry we left you behind." Emily clutched the phone tightly. She wanted to blame them, wanted to tell them how scared and lonely she was. But then she realized she was no longer the weak child. "It's okay, Mom, I'm okay." Her mother choked up. "Grandpa took good care of you, didn't he?" Emily looked out the window, where Grandpa was chopping wood in the yard. Each movement was decisive, slow, but strong. She smiled. "Yes, he's the best man in the world." Her mother sighed in relief. "We'll find a way to get back to you as soon as possible. Wait for us, okay?" Emily nodded, but she knew in her heart that she couldn't just wait anymore. As the summer passed, Emily no longer looked forward to returning to the city as before. She decided to stay a while longer, helping her grandfather manage the farm. She went to school as usual, gradually integrating into rural life. People who had been strangers became friends. She learned how to ride a horse, how to mend fences, and even helped her grandfather sell produce at the weekend market. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, her grandfather spoke softly. "I know you didn't like this place at first." Emily laughed. "I used to think this was the most boring place in the world. And now?" She leaned her head on his shoulder and softly replied, "Now, this is my home." Grandpa smiled, his eyes warm and proud. Life is full of ups and downs. There are times when we are pushed into situations we never wanted. But it is those challenges that help us grow. Emily learned that family is not only the people who gave birth to us, but also the people who are always by our side, loving and protecting us unconditionally. And most importantly, she realized that everyone has the strength to stand up, to fight, and to find their own path. No matter how painful the past is, no matter how uncertain the future is, as long as there are people who love us by our side, we will always find the light. And for Emily, her journey has only just begun. Life is full of unpredictable events. There are times when we are pushed into difficult situations, facing loss, fear, and loneliness. But it is in those moments that we understand the true value of family, love, and courage. Emily once felt abandoned, thinking that she could not overcome the shock of having to leave her parents. But thanks to the love and perseverance of her grandfather, she gradually realized that family is not only the people who gave birth to us, but also the people who are always ready to protect us, no matter the circumstances. This story conveys the message that family is the most precious thing. No matter how far away, family is still the place we can always return to. True strength comes from within. When facing adversity, we have the right to be afraid, but we also have the strength to overcome it. Cherish those who are always by our side. Sometimes, happiness doesn't come from what we lose, but from what we still have. Everyone in life will go through their own challenges, but if we have enough faith, courage, and love, we will always find a way to move forward.